The lake was too still that morning, its surface a sheet of glass trapping the shadows of the pines. I sat in our small boat, Zach across from me, both of us unaware that something ancient was already watching, its gaze heavy, waiting for us. To notice Daunt, it was a Saturday, like every Saturday before it, when Zach and I would haul our fishing gear to this secluded lake nestled deep in the Rockies. The water was a mirror, reflecting pines that stood like silent sentinels along the shore. We'd been coming here for years, our ritual carved into the rhythm of our lives' rods, bait, a cooler of drinks, and the kind of easy banter that only comes from knowing someone inside out. That morning, though, something was off. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against my chest, and my eyelids were heavy from a late night of laughing over stupid stories. I slouched in the boat, rod loose in my hands, the gentle lap of water against the hull, lulling me toward sleep. Zach, sitting across from me, was sharper, his eyes scanning the water for any ripple that might betray a fish. He'd already pulled in a small trout, grinning like he'd won a prize. Well, I hadn't gotten so much as a nibble, and then it happened, a sound that ripped through the morning like a blade. Not the soft rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird, but a sharp, deliberate crack, like a tree branch snapped in two by something with purpose. My head jerked up, heart stuttering as I scanned the tree line. The pines stood motionless, their dark needles blending into shadows that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I squinted, searching for movement, but there was nothing, just the forest, vast and unyielding, staring back. "You hear that?" I asked Zach, my voice low, as if speaking too loudly might summon whatever had made that sound. He nodded, his brow furrowed, but neither of us said more. We went back to our rods, pretending the world hadn't just tilted slightly off its axis. Hours dragged on, the sun climbing higher, its light glinting off the water in a way that made my head ache. My line stayed slack, the fish ignoring my bait like it was cursed. Zach wasn't doing much better, his earlier catch a fleeting victory. We started talking about packing it in, heading back to town for burgers and a nap. The lake felt too quiet now, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums, making you aware of every breath you take. I was about to suggest we call it, when something struck the boat, a dull, heavy thud that vibrated through the wood. I froze, my hands tightening on the oar. "What was that?" I said, my eyes darting to the water. Zach leaned over his side, peering into the depths, but before he could answer, another thud hit his side of the boat, harder this time. He flinched, his hand flying to his arm. "Ouch!" He yelped, his voice sharp with pain. I spun toward him, my pulse racing. "What's wrong?" He was clutching his arm, his face twisted in confusion. Slowly he opened his hand, revealing a small, jagged rock, no bigger than a walnut, lying in the bottom of the boat. "This hit me," he said, his voice unsteady, "right on my arm. It stings like hell." I stared at the rock, its edges glinting in the sunlight, and a cold knot formed in my stomach. "Where'd it come from?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Zach shook his head, his eyes scanning the shore. "I don't know, it just hit me." Feel the weight of that moment, the way the world narrows to a single point, where every sound, every shadow becomes a threat. We sat there, our boat drifting slightly, the water lapping at the hull like it was whispering secrets. I scanned the tree line again, my heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat. The bushes along the shore seemed to quiver, not with the wind, but with something else, something alive, something watching. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a deer or a raccoon, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Zach was still rubbing his arm, his face pale, when a sharp pain exploded across the back of my neck. I cried out, my hand flying to the spot, and when I pulled it away, my fingers were smeared with a faint trace of blood. Another rock, identical to the one that hit Zach, rolled across the boat's floor, coming to rest against my boot. You're there with us now, aren't you? In that boat, the water stretching out like a trap, the forest closing in, and something out there choosing you as its prey. My breath came in short gasps as I stared at the rock, its presence and accusation. Zach, I whispered, my voice barely audible, this isn't right. He didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the shore, where the bushes were moving again, parting like a curtain. And then we heard it, a sound that clawed its way into my soul, a deep, guttural grunt, like a beast drawing breath through a throat not meant for human sounds. It wasn't loud, but it was close, too close, reverberating through the air and into my bones. My skin prickled, every nerve screaming to run, but there was nowhere to go. We were trapped, floating on a lake that suddenly felt like a cage. Let me take you deeper, to a memory within a memory, a story my grandfather once told me. He was a hunter, a man who'd spent his life in these mountains, and he'd spoken of the old ones creatures that lived in the spaces between, where the world blurred into something else. He'd seen things, he said, things that watched from the shadows, things that didn't belong. I'd laughed it off as a kid, but now in that boat, his words came rushing back, each one a weight pressing against my chest. What if he was right? What if we'd stumbled into their domain? The bushes parted further, and there it was. It rose slowly, deliberately, as if it wanted us to see every moment of its unveiling. 8 feet tall, maybe more, its body a mass of muscle and dark reddish-brown fur that seemed to drink in the light. Its arms hung low, knuckles brushing the ground, and its chest heaved with slow, steady breaths. But it was the eyes that stopped my heart, yellow, glowing like embers, locked onto us with an intelligence that felt ancient, predatory. You can't look away, can you? Those eyes, they pull you in, they know you. They see every fear you've ever buried. It stood there, unblinking, its head tilted slightly, as if studying us, weighing our worth. Zach's breath caught, a small, choked sound, and I knew he saw it, too. The creature's lips parted, revealing teeth that glinted in the sunlight, and then it let out a sound, a long, piercing wail that tore through the silence like a warning. The lake, the forest, the sky itself seemed to shudder in its wake. My hands trembled on the oars, my body screaming to move, but I was frozen, pinned by those eyes. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it turned and vanished into the trees, the bush swallowing it whole. The silence that followed was worse than the sound, a void that sucked the air from my lungs. Stay with me now. Feel the boat rocking beneath you, the weight of what you've just seen. We sat there, Zach and I, for what felt like hours, though. It was probably only minutes. The lake was still, the forest silent, but the air felt alive, charged with the presence of something we couldn't name. Did you see that? Zach finally whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. I nodded, unable to form words, my throat tight with fear. "What was it?" he asked, but I had no answer. All I knew was that we weren't alone, not anymore. Let's pause here, let the fear settle into your bones, because this is where the story turns. We didn't speak again, not yet. Instead, we moved, our hands fumbling with the oars, pulling the boat toward shore with a desperation that bordered on panic. The water resisted, each stroke heavy, as if the lake itself was trying to keep us there. When we reached the bank, we scrambled out, our boots sinking into the mud, and hauled the boat onto the grass. My heart was a drum in my chest, my eyes darting to the tree line, expecting to see those yellow eyes staring back. We grabbed our gear, not bothering to pack properly, and sprinted to the car, the forest looming over us like a predator waiting to strike dot as we peeled out onto the main road. Tires screeching, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and there it was. Again, a shadow, massive and swift, running parallel to us along the edge of the trees. Its movements were fluid, almost graceful, but there was a purpose to them, a hunger. I pressed the gas harder, the car lurching forward, but the creature kept pace, its form a blur of fur and muscle. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. It stood there, at the edge of the forest, those yellow eyes burning into me, unblinking, as if marking me for later. The car rounded a bend, and it was gone, swallowed by the trees. "You're still here, aren't you?" You can feel it, that weight on your chest, the certainty that something knows you now. Zach and I didn't speak the whole drive home. The radio stayed off, the hum of the engine, the only sound. When we finally pulled into my driveway, the sun was high, the world bright and ordinary, but it felt wrong, like a mask hiding something darker. We sat in the car for a long time, neither of us ready to face the normalcy of the world. "That was a Sasquatch," Zach said finally, his voice flat, like he was stating a fact he wished he could unlearn. I nodded, because what else could I say? We'd seen it, felt it, and it had changed us, Dot. And here's the truth, the one that keeps me up at night. That lake, that forest, it wasn't ours. We'd trespassed, stepped into a place where we didn't belong, and something had noticed. Those rocks, that wail, those eyes, they were warnings, or maybe something worse, a claim. I've never gone back to that lake, and neither has Zach. We don't talk about it. Not really, but sometimes I catch him staring out a window, his eyes distant, like he's looking for something he hopes he'll never find. And me? I dream of it, those yellow eyes glowing in the dark, closer each time. Watching, waiting, Dot, if you ever find yourself in Colorado, fishing on a quiet lake, listen closely. The forest has eyes, and they don't forget. The night was alive with laughter and the clink of bottles, but beneath it all, something waited in the dark, its eyes already fixed on us. It was one of those late summer evenings, the kind where the air carries a hint of autumn, but still clings to the warmth of July. Our neighborhood was gathered for a barbecue at my house. Parents sprawled across lawn chairs in the front yard, their voices rising and falling with stories and half-remembered jokes. Used kids, restless and bored, had drifted to the neighbor's place, chasing fireflies and kicking at the grass. The breeze came in soft waves, rustling the leaves of the old oak that loomed over the backyard, its branches casting shadows that danced across the ground like fingers reaching for something just out of grasp. I was 16, old enough to feel invincible, but young enough to crave the thrill of something new. My best friend Connor was with me, his lanky frame slouched against the fence as we tossed pebbles into the grass, waiting for the night to offer us something worth doing. The other kids were scattered around, some chasing each other, others huddled over a phone, their faces lit by the glow of a video. I'd always been drawn to the strange, the unexplained hours spent binging shows about ghosts and creatures that lurked beyond the veil of the ordinary. Connor teased me for it, but I could tell he was curious too, his eyes lingering on the dark corners of the world just a little longer than most. That night, though, I was the one who broke the monotony. "Let's play hide and seek," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. Feel the rush of that moment, the way a simple game can turn the familiar into something unknown. The kids perked up, their boredom giving way to excitement, and soon we were setting rules. No going inside. Stay within the yards, and tag meant you were out. Connor and I paired up, as we always did, slipping into the neighbor's backyard to find a spot. The fence was our perch, a wooden barrier separating the yard from the alley beyond, where the street lights barely reached. We climbed up, balancing on the narrow edge, our sneakers dangling as we scanned the shadows for the seeker. The night felt heavier now, the air thick with the scent of grilled meat and damp earth. The oak's leaves whispered above us, their movement a soft rhythm that lulled my senses. I leaned back, my hands gripping the fence, and let my eyes drift to the stars, faint pinpricks in a sky that seemed too vast, too close. Connor was quiet beside me, his usual chatter replaced by a stillness I didn't notice at first. And then it changed. The air grew cold, sharp, like a blade pressed against my skin. I glanced at Connor, and my breath caught. He was trembling, his shoulders hunched, his hands clenched around the fence. His face was pale, almost gray, like the life had drained out of him. I reached out, my hand hovering over his shoulder, and felt it a chill radiating from him, unnatural, like standing too close to an open freezer. "You okay?" I asked, my voice low, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the moment. He turned to me, his eyes wide, and whispered, "Are you cold?" I shook my head, confusion tightening my chest. His skin looked like snow under the moonlight, his breath visible in the warm night air. Stay with me now, feel the weight of that moment, the way the world shifts when you realize something's wrong. I opened my mouth to ask again, but then I saw them two red lights, glowing like embers, hovering in the alley beyond the fence. They weren't street lights, not headlights, but something alive, something that saw me. You can't look away, can you? Those eyes, they pull you in, they know you. The lights moved, sliding to the left, smooth and deliberate, and then impossibly they passed through the wall of the neighbor's garage, vanishing like a dream. My heart pounded, a drumbeat in my ears, but I couldn't move, couldn't blink. The air was heavier now, pressing against my lungs, and the night felt wrong, like a photograph with the colors inverted. I tore my eyes away and grabbed my jacket, draping it over Connor's shoulders, hoping the warmth would bring him back. He didn't speak, just stared at the spot where the lights had been, his breath shallow and uneven. We sat there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, the game forgotten, the other kids' laughter a distant echo. Let me take you deeper, to a story my uncle once told me. one I'd laughed off until that night. He was a trucker, always driving through the back roads of nowhere, and he'd spoken of things that lived in the dark, creatures with eyes like fire, hungry for more than flesh. He'd seen one, he said, on a moonless night in the woods, its gaze locking onto him through the windshield, promising things he couldn't name. I'd called it nonsense, but now, with Connor shivering beside me, I wondered if he'd been right. What if those eyes were watching us now, waiting for us to make a mistake? And then it came a scream, sharp and raw, slicing through the night like a warning. It was my little sister, her voice unmistakable, filled with terror. My body moved before my mind could catch up, my feet hitting the ground as I vaulted off the fence. Connor followed, his jacket slipping from his shoulders, his face still pale but set with determination. We ran toward the sound, the grass slick. Under our sneakers, the oak's shadows stretching across the yard like claws. The other kids had stopped, their faces pale in the moonlight, pointing toward the far corner of the yard where the trees met the fence. My sister was there, curled on the ground, her hands over her ears, her body shaking, and above her stood a figure tall and impossibly thin, its form a skeleton wrapped in darkness. You're there with us now, aren't you? In that yard, the night closing in, and something inhuman staring down at you. Its head was tilted, antlers twisted, jagged jutting from its skull like a crown of thorns. Its eyes were red, the same red I'd seen in the alley, burning with a hunger that made my blood run cold. Its limbs were too long, too thin, bending in ways that defied bone and muscle. It loomed over my sister, its presence a weight that pressed against my chest, stealing my breath. I don't know what possessed me, but I stepped forward, my voice breaking the silence. "Hey!" I shouted, waving my arms, my fear drowned by a surge of defiance. The creature turned, its head snapping toward me with a speed that wasn't natural. Those eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I was nowhere lost in a void where only hunger existed. A hunger that wanted me to feel the pull of those eyes, the way they strip you bare, leaving only fear. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth like shards of glass, and then it moved, not ran, but glided toward the woods beyond the yard. The trees swallowed it, their branches closing like a curtain, and the night was silent again, save for my sister's sobs. I rushed to her, dropping to my knees, my hands shaking as I pulled her close. Her skin was cold, too cold, like she'd been dipped in ice. "It's okay," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. Connor stood behind me, his breath ragged, his eyes fixed on the woods where the creature had gone. The other kids gathered around, their voices a jumble of fear and confusion, but I barely heard them. All I could see were those red eyes burned into my mind like a brand. Stay with me now, because this is where the story lingers. We didn't play hide and seek again that night. The parents, alerted by the commotion, called us back to the house, their faces tight with worry. I told them my sister had tripped, scared herself in the dark, but I could see they didn't believe. Mom. Connor didn't speak, not then, not for days after. We sat in my room later, the lights on, the door locked, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. "It was a wendigo," I said finally, my voice low, the word heavy on my tongue. I'd read about them creatures of famine and greed, born from the darkest parts of the soul. Connor nodded, his eyes distant, like he was still seeing those lights in the alley, It knew us, he whispered, and I couldn't argue. It had looked at me, seen me in a way nothing ever had. And here's the truth, the one that haunts me still. That night changed us. My sister doesn't talk about it, but she won't go near the woods, won't play outside after dark. Kame moved away a year later, and we lost touch. But I heard he doesn't sleep well, dreams of red eyes waking him in the night. Me? I still see it, sometimes in the shadows of my room, in the flicker of a street light. I've never gone back to that yard, never walked past those trees without feeling it watching, waiting. If you're out there playing games in the dark, be careful. Some things find you when you hide, and they don't let go. The Appalachian forest stretched before us, its trees like silent judges, their roots drinking secrets we were never meant to know. I was 16, reckless and eager, standing at the edge of a trail that barely deserved the name. It was late. Afternoon, the sun a pale orb, sinking toward the mountains, casting long shadows that bled across the ground. My friends and I, Mark among them, had planned a camping trip, a weekend of freedom in the wilds of West Virginia. We'd hiked these hills before, followed paths worn smooth by generations, but this time we chose a shortcut, an old trail my grandfather had warned me about. His voice echoed in my mind, low and grave, speaking of places best left alone, trails forgotten for reasons no one dared name. I laughed it off, his stories just old man's tales, but as we stepped onto that overgrown path, the air felt heavier, like it was holding its breath. The trail was a tangle of roots and thorns, barely wide enough for us to walk single file. Brambles snagged at my jeans, their barbs sharp against my skin, and the canopy above wove a net of branches that dimmed the light. Mark was ahead, his backpack bouncing with each step, his laughter cutting through the quiet as he mocked my grandfather's warnings. "What's gonna get us?" he called back, grinning. "Some ghost deer?" I rolled my eyes, but my smile felt forced. The forest was too still, the usual chatter of birds and squirrels absent, as if every living thing had fled. Feel the weight of that silence, the way it presses against your ears, making you question what's out there. We pushed deeper, the path twisting like a snake, leading us into a world that felt older, untouched, and somehow aware, and then we saw the markings carved into the trees, raw and deliberate, like wounds in the bark. Circles, spirals, figures with limbs too long, too thin, etched with a precision that made my stomach twist. Some were fresh, the wood still pale, others faded, their edges softened by time. They pointed forward, an unspoken command urging us. What are these?" Mark asked, his voice quieter now, his fingers tracing a spiral. No one answered. We didn't know, couldn't know, but the symbols felt alive, their shapes curling into my mind like smoke. I told myself they were just graffiti, some hiker's art, but the forest's silence told a different story. You see them too, don't you? Those shapes, they pull you in, they whisper things you can't unhear. The sun dipped lower, its light fading to a sickly gold, and we realized we were lost. The trail had vanished, swallowed by undergrowth, leaving us in a maze of trees that seemed to shift when we weren't looking. Panic crept in, a cold thread winding through my chest, but we kept moving, hoping to find the campsite. That's when the whispers began soft, indistinct, like leaves brushing against each other. At first, I thought it was the wind, but there was no breeze, no movement in the branches. The voices grew clearer, a chorus of murmurs just beyond our flashlight's beams, circling us like predators. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking, thinking it was a prank, some locals messing with us. No answer, only more whispers. Their rhythm uneven, almost human, but not quite. Stay with me now, feel the chill of those voices, the way they crawl into your thoughts. We turned back, desperate to retrace our steps, but the path was different, narrower, darker, the trees closing, and like walls. The carvings had changed, no longer spirals, but figures, human-like, with hollow eyes and mouths stretched wide in silent screams. My flashlight shook in my hand, its beam catching glimpses of bark that seemed to pulse, as if the trees were breathing. Mark's face was pale, his bravado gone, his eyes darting to the shadows. "This isn't right," he whispered, and I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, weaving a net around us. "You hear them too, don't you? They know your name. They know your fears. Let me take you deeper, to a story my grandfather told me, one I dismissed until that night. He'd been a ranger, patrolling these mountains for decades, and he'd spoken of trails that led nowhere, places where the forest guarded its own. Once he'd found a hiker, lost for days, babbling about shadows that moved and voices that followed. The man's eyes had been wild, his hands clutching a sketchbook filled with spirals and hollow-eyed figures. My grandfather burned the book, he said, but the hiker never recovered, his mind lost to the woods. I'd thought it was just a story, but now, with the whispers closing in, I wondered if he'd walked this same trail. What if we were next? And then we saw them, tall, thin shadows, standing among the trees, their forms barely visible, like smoke given shape. They shifted when we tried to focus, their edges blurring, but their presence was undeniable, a weight that pressed against my chest. One stepped closer, its silhouette sharper, its limbs too long, bending in ways that defied flesh and bone. Mark screamed a raw, desperate sound and bolted, crashing through the underbrush. We followed, our flashlights swinging wildly, branches tearing at our skin as we ran without direction. The whispers turned to laughter, mocking and distorted, echoing through the trees like a chorus of the damned. "You're running with us now, aren't you? The forest at your back, the laughter in your ears, and nowhere to hide." Somehow we stumbled onto a dirt road, the trees parting as if releasing us. My lungs burned, my legs trembling, but I didn't stop until we were far from the woods. The trail was gone. No opening in the trees, no sign of the path we'd taken. We stood there, panting, our flashlights pointed at the forest, but it was silent now, its secrets buried deep. Mark was different after that night, his laughter gone, his eyes haunted. He stopped talking to us, moved away a year later, and I never heard from him again. I tried to forget, to convince myself it was a trick of the mind, but the forest stayed with me, its whispers lingering at the edges of my dreams. And here's where the story turns, where the past reaches into the present. Last week I went hiking with my girlfriend, Sarah, near our cabin in the same mountains. The trail was safe, well marked, but as we passed a clearing, I saw it a symbol carved into a tree, a spiral fresh and raw, and below it, in jagged letters, my name. My heart stopped, the world narrowing to that single word, etched like a claim. Sarah laughed, called it a prank, but I knew better. You feel it too, don't you? The weight of your name, written by something that knows you. That night I couldn't sleep. The forest's silence outside our cabin, too loud, too alive. 2 nights ago, the whispers returned, soft, indistinct, just beyond the window. I lay frozen in bed, my pulse hammering, Sarah asleep beside me, oblivious. Through the thin curtain, I saw it, a tall, thin outline, standing beyond the trees, watching. I shut my eyes, telling myself it wasn't real, but the whispers didn't stop, their voices creeping into my thoughts. The next morning, I found footprints outside, elongated, misshapen, like nothing human. The dirt around a nearby tree was disturbed, and carved into its bark was a message. You left, we remember. I haven't told Sarah, not yet, but I know I can't ignore it. The whispers follow me now, lingering at the edges of my hearing, and I feel them getting closer, there. Presence a shadow I can't outrun. The forest exhaled a silence that clung to my skin, its darkness a veil hiding something that already knew our names. Sarah and I had driven out to a state park an hour and a half from Portland, our tires crunching over gravel as we pulled into a campsite tucked at the end of a quiet loop. It was late September, the air sharp with the promise of fall, the trees around us shedding leaves that drifted like warnings. We'd been friends since college, our weekend camping trips a ritual. To escape the city's hum-nothing extreme, just a tent, a fire, and the kind of laughter that made the world feel safe. Sarah always brought her pepper spray, a habit born from a strange encounter at another campground years ago, her fingers brushing the canister like a talisman. That Friday afternoon, we set up our tent under a sky bruised with clouds, the campsite. Nearly empty, its solitude a comfort we didn't yet question. The forest loomed beyond our sight, pines standing like sentinels, their needles swallowing the last of the daylight. We built a fire, its flames licking the air, and cooked dinner over the crackling logs, the scent of charred vegetables mingling with the damp earth. A few beers loosened our tongues. Sarah's stories about her new job filling the space between. But as night fell, the woods grew too quiet, their stillness a weight that pressed against my chest. No birds called, no crickets sang, only the fire's soft hiss and our own voices, suddenly small in the vastness. I shifted closer to the flames, my eyes darting to the tree line, where shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Feel the chill of that moment, the way the silence wraps around you, hinting at something watching. I told myself it was nothing, just the forest settling, but then I felt it a prickle at the back of my neck, like eyes boring into me from the dark, and there he was, a figure standing just beyond the fire's reach, half hidden behind a massive pine. He was enormous, at least 6.5 feet tall, his frame broad and heavy, like a wall of muscle carved from the earth. His beard was a tangled mass, dark and wild, blending with long matted hair that fell across his face. His clothes filthy. Jeans and a red and black flannel, torn at the sleeves, hung on him like a second skin, stained with something I didn't want to name. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart, glinting in the firelight, unblinking, fixed on us with a hunger. That felt alive. You see him too, don't you? Those eyes, they know you, they strip you bare. He stood motionless, a statue carved from nightmare, his head tilted slightly, as if studying us, weighing our fear. When he realized I'd seen him, he didn't move, didn't flinch, just held my gaze until the darkness seemed to bend around him. Then, slowly, he stepped back, his movements deliberate, his eyes never leaving us until the trees swallowed him whole dot, my breath caught. My hands trembling as I turned to Sarah. There was someone out there, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the fire's hiss. Her face paled, her hand diving into her backpack for the pepper spray, her fingers shaking as she clutched it. We moved quickly, dousing the fire, locking food and gear in the car, our movements frantic, as if speed could erase what I'd seen. We dove into the tent, zipping it shut, our phones and the pepper spray clutched tight. Stay with me now, feel. The tent's thin walls, the darkness pressing in, and the certainty that he's still out there. We lay there, whispering about leaving, every rustle in the woods a threat. Sleep came in fragments, broken by the forest's silence. But nothing more happened that night. The man or whatever he was gone, or so we hoped. Let me take you deeper to a story Sarah once shared, one that haunted me that night. She'd been camping alone years ago when she'd woken to footsteps circling her tent, slow and deliberate, like a predator testing its prey. No one was there when she looked, but her gear was rearranged, her cooler opened, as if someone had been playing with her. She'd laughed it off later, but her pepper spray never left her side after that. Lying in our tent, I wondered if this was the same man or something worse, something that had followed her or us into these woods. What if he'd been waiting all along? The next morning we tried to shake it off, the sunlight making the night's fear feel distant, unreal. We hiked the trails around the lake, sticking together, Sarah's pepper spray in her pocket, its presence a fragile shield. The paths were empty, not a single hiker in sight, the forest's silence following us like a shadow. We told ourselves the man was just a camper, maybe drunk, maybe curious, but the words felt hollow. By afternoon, we were heading back to our site, the sun low, casting long shadows that stretched across the trail like fingers. And then we heard a shuffling, dragging sound, not footsteps, but something deliberate, unnatural. My heart raced, my eyes meeting Sarah's, her hand already on the pepper spray. We didn't want to look, but we did, turning to see him, the same man, 50 feet back, standing in broad daylight. His clothes were the same, filthier, in the sun's glare, dark. Stains spreading across his jeans and flannel, their nature too awful to guess. His hair hung over his face, but I saw it a grin, wide and yellow toothed, splitting his face like a wound. His eyes gleamed, wild and unhinged, sparkling with a joy that made my stomach churn. You're there with us now, aren't you? On that trail, his grin pulling you in, his eyes promising something terrible. We stood frozen, caught in his gaze until we moved, our steps quickening. He matched our pace, never closer, never farther, his grin unchanging, his movements a twisted mirror of ours. Sarah's grip on my arm was iron, her breath sharp and shallow, but I barely felt it, my pulse drowning out the world. I glanced back once more, his face clearer now, his expression a mask of predatory delight, as if our fear was a game he'd won. We reached the campsite, our hands shaking, as we sat by the fire, too afraid to leave, too stubborn to admit defeat. We'd paid for 2 nights, had food ready, stupid reasons, looking back, but they kept us there. The fire burned low, neither of us daring to fetch more wood, our backs to the tent, our eyes on the darkness. And then the crickets stopped there, silence, a blade cutting through the night. The air grew heavy, oppressive, and a new sound emerged, a low, raspy mumble, rhythmic and wrong, coming from the woods behind our tent. It wasn't a conversation, not self-talk, but something ritualistic, starting and stopping, sometimes counting, sometimes chanting words we couldn't catch. Feel the dread of that sound, the way it burrows into your mind, refusing to let go. Footsteps followed, slow and deliberate, circling our sight just beyond the fire's light. They faded to one side, only to return from another, each step closer, each pause a taunt. We heard his hand drag across the car, a slow scrape that sent shivers down my spine, then the rustle of our camp chairs as if he was toying with us. The mumbling never stopped, its cadence a pulse that matched my racing heart. The fire was dying, its shadows long and twisting, making every movement a threat. We caught glimpses of him, his silhouette darting at the edge of our vision, gone. When we looked directly, like a phantom playing with our minds. Sarah held the pepper spray, her hands trembling, but we both knew it was useless against something that seemed everywhere and nowhere. And then the footsteps stopped right behind our tent. The mumbling grew louder, words forming, slithering through the air. "Pretty girls, come out to play," delivered in a scratchy, sing-song tone that turned my blood to ice. His shadow loomed on the tent wall, tall and distorted, his hand sliding down the fabric, a slow, deliberate caress. The tent shook violently, as if he meant to tear it apart, his laughter a low, guttural sound that filled the night. Sarah fumbled. With the pepper spray, her hands too unsteady to aim. I snapped out of my fear, hitting the emergency call button on my phone, shouting that we were calling the police. The shaking stopped, the laughter cut off, and we heard him run, his steps fading into the woods. We didn't wait. We grabbed our phones, keys, and the pepper spray, sprinting to the car, locking the doors as I started the engine. The headlights caught him standing at the edge of our sight, his grin wide and twisted, his eyes gleaming under the light. You see that grin, don't you? It knows you. It promises you'll never forget. I threw the car into reverse, tires spinning as we fled. The forest a blur of shadows. We drove to the ranger station, closed for the night, and called the emergency number. A deputy checked the campground, but found no one, no trace of the man. The next morning, we returned with a ranger to collect our gear. The tent stood, but our chairs, cooler, and bags were scattered, slashed, and broken as if torn apart in rage. The ranger mentioned other reports, a man matching his description, lurking, scaring campers, never caught, possibly living in the woods. Sarah and I haven't camped since. The forest's silence a memory we can't shake. We talk about it sometimes, wondering who he was, what he wanted, but the truth is, I'm not sure I want to know. If you camp in those woods, keep your fire bright. Something's out there, and it's watching. The forest held its breath as I stepped onto forbidden ground, its shadows whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I was 17, cocky and restless, crouched in a makeshift blind high on the white oaks of Old Man Cooper's land, an hour outside Atlanta. The air was warm for early October, heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine. the sky just beginning to lighten with a pale, ghostly glow. Hunting was in my blood, a ritual passed down through generations in our small town where rifles were. As familiar as family, I'd been handling them since I was 12, starting with squirrels and rabbits, graduating to deer by 16, thinking I knew the woods like my own skin. That's why I ignored the no trespassing signs nailed to Cooper's trees. Their faded warnings, nothing more than a challenge to a kid who thought he was untouchable. Cooper's land was legendary, its deer trails the best in the county, but no one dared hunt there. The old man was fierce, his reputation built on stories of chasing off trespassers with a shotgun loaded with rock salt. I'd heard he'd nearly caught some kids drinking on his property, their screams echoing through town. But I was smarter, or so I thought. I'd spent the summer scouting, mapping every trail, dodging his game cameras, finding the perfect spot, a natural blind in a cluster of oaks, 12 feet up, cobbled together with 2x4s and rope. It was amateur work, creaking under my weight, but it gave me a clear view of a deer path, worn deep by years of hoof prints. I settled in before dawn, my old Remington 700 resting across my knees, its scope glinting faintly as the world woke around me. Feel the stillness of that morning, the way the forest watches, waiting for you to make a mistake. The woods were quiet, too quiet, the only sound the occasional fall of an acorn, sharp against the silence. Squirrels darted through the underbrush. A raccoon shuffled past, but no deer showed. Hours passed, the sun climbing, its light filtering through the canopy in dappled patches that danced across the forest floor. My eyes grew heavy, my focus drifting until movement caught my scope. 80 yards out, a flicker in the undergrowth. My heart kicked into gear, my finger brushing the trigger, expecting antlers. But as I adjusted the scope, the shape sharpened and my breath stopped. It wasn't a deer, it was a woman, young, maybe in her early 20s, walking through the trees with a slow, deliberate grace. You see her now, don't you? Her form gliding through the shadows, pulling you into her world. She wore a white dress, simple and plain, like something from a century past, its hem brushing the ground. Her skin was pale, not just fair, but grayish like ash under moonlight, and her hair long, dark, loose swayed with each step, untouched by the breeze that wasn't there. She moved without sound, no rustle of leaves, no snap of twigs, her presence a violation of the forest's rules. Her steps traced a strange pattern, pausing to touch a tree or stare at the ground, as if searching for something lost. I watched, frozen, my scope locked on her, my mind racing. A prank, maybe? Someone on drugs, wandering the woods? But her movements were wrong, like an old film stuttering, each frame slightly off, her body flickering at the edges of reality. Stay with me now. Feel the weight of her gaze, the way it finds you even through the trees. I tracked her for minutes, maybe 10, my breath shallow, my hands trembling on the rifle. She never looked my way, never seemed to notice me, until a crow broke the silence, its call sharp and jarring, nearly knocking me from my perch. My heart pounded, my eyes darting to the bird, then back to the scope. She'd stopped, standing still, her body rigid. Slowly her head turned and her eyes black, empty. like voids carved into her face, locked onto mine through the lens. Her face was young but ancient, etched with a sorrow that felt eternal. My blood ran cold, my fingers slipping from the trigger, and I jerked back, my head striking a branch. When I looked again, without the scope, she was gone, the forest empty, as if she'd never been there. You feel it too, don't you? The absence where she stood, the silence that screams louder than any sound. I sat there, my chest heaving, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe I'd dozed off, dreamed her into existence. But then a cold pressure settled on my right shoulder, not cool but freezing, like a hand carved from ice. My body locked, my breath caught, and a voice female, young, stern, whispered in my ear, clear as day, "Go home." It wasn't a suggestion, but a command, laced with a warning I felt in my bones. I scrambled down the tree, my rifle banging against my back, my boots slipping on the makeshift ladder. I ran, crashing through the underbrush, branches tearing at my skin until I burst through my back door, sweating and shaking. My mom saw me, her eyes wide, assuming I'd crossed Cooper with his shotgun. I let her believe it, too shaken to tell the truth. Let me take you deeper to a story my father once told, one that haunted me as I lay awake that night. He'd grown up in these woods, hunting with his own father, and he'd spoken of strange things, lights in the trees, voices calling names in the dark. Once he'd found a clearing with stones arranged in a circle, too perfect to be natural, and felt eyes on him until he left. He never went back, he said, because some places belonged to something else. I'd laughed it off as a kid, but now, with the memory of those black eyes burning in my mind, I wondered if he'd seen her too. What if she'd been waiting all these years for someone to trespass again? Days passed, but the woman stayed with me, her face flickering in my dreams, her voice echoing in quiet moments. I couldn't shake it, so I dug into the history of Cooper's land, scouring county records online. I found mentions of a Whitaker family, homesteaders in the 1800s, whose daughter vanished in 1878, her name lost to time. The land passed to Cooper's grandfather after the family left. There, grief too heavy to stay, I told myself it was coincidence, but the cold on my shoulder lingered, a reminder I couldn't ignore. 2 weeks later, my Uncle Mike asked me to hunt with him on land bordering Cooper's, half a mile from my blind. I said yes, partly to prove I wasn't scared, partly to see if the woods would show me something again. We set up at dawn, Mike 200 yards away, watching a field edge. I tried to focus, my rifle steady, but my eyes kept drifting to the tree line, searching for a flash of white. I missed 2 clear shots that morning, my mind elsewhere, until we'd packed up at noon, walking an old logging road back to the truck. Mike was quiet, his usual stories absent until he stopped, his face tight. "See anyone out there today?" he asked, his voice careful. I shook my head, my stomach twisting, and then he told me, his words a blade through my heart. He'd seen a girl, no older than 8, sitting 20 yards from my spot, her dress old-fashioned, streaked with mud, her dark hair tangled. She'd been staring at me, unblinking, until he looked away to stow his thermos. When he looked back, she was gone, no trace. no sound. She reminded me of a photo, he said, his voice low, my grandmother's aunt, a kid who died in the 1870s. Same dress, same hair. He didn't know about the woman I'd seen, but his words tied us to the Whitakers, his ancestors, their loss woven into the land. You feel the weight of that connection, don't you? The past reaching out, claiming you as its own. I never hunted on Cooper's land again, but the woods haven't let me go. At dawn, when the light filters through the trees, I catch glimpses of white, fleeting and faint, moving between the trunks. I don't look too hard, afraid of what I'll find. Mike and I don't talk about that day, but I see him scanning the tree line when we hunt, his eyes searching for something he can't name. And sometimes, in the quiet of the forest, I feel the cold fingers on my shoulder, a whisper urging me away from places I shouldn't be. If you hunt in these woods, tread lightly. Some things are meant to stay buried, and they don't forget those who disturb them. The woods beyond my window stretched into darkness, their branches clawing at a sky that hid something watching, waiting for me to look too long. And I was 14, a kid with a hunger for adventure, living in a small rural town in Missouri where the forest was my playground. Our house sat on the edge of a vast wilderness, fields and trees sprawling out like an endless maze, calling me to explore. I'd spent years wandering those woods, building forts, chasing deer trails, never fearing the shadows that lingered at dusk. But that summer, something changed. It started as a prickle on my skin, a feeling of eyes on my back when I was alone, a presence that followed me through the trees. Feel the weight of that gaze, the way it clings to you, knowing you can't see it. I was out in the forest one afternoon, searching for a spot to build a log cabin, a dream born from too many adventure. Books. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of pine and earth, the sun filtering through the canopy in golden shards. I moved deeper, my boots crunching over leaves, until the world went still, the forest holding its breath. No birds sang, no squirrels chattered, only a silence that pressed against my ears, making my pulse loud in my head. My skin prickled, the hair on my arms standing upright, as if the air itself had turned electric. I stopped, my eyes scanning the trees, expecting a bear or mountain lion creatures common in these parts. But there was nothing, no tracks, no rustle, just the weight of unseen eyes. You feel it too, don't you? The silence that screams, the certainty that something's there. I told myself it was nothing, just a kid's imagination running wild, and kept searching. But the feeling grew, a cold knot in my stomach. By dusk, it was unbearable, a pressure that drove me back toward home. I walked fast, then ran, branches snagging at my clothes, my breath ragged. The feeling followed, relentless, until I crossed the threshold of our house, slamming the door behind me. The moment I stepped inside, it vanished, like a switch flipped, leaving only the hum of the kitchen light and my racing heart. It happened. Again and again, every time I ventured into the woods, the gaze waiting, patient, until I retreated to safety. I got used to it, or thought I did, convincing myself it was paranoia, a trick of the mind. But a month ago, everything changed. Winter had come early, snow blanketing the fields, and I was stuck in my second-story room, sick with a fever that left me weak. My window overlooked the woods, a football field away, their snow-dusted trees stark against the gray sky. I'd been in bed all day, my throat raw, my glasses broken from an accident the day before, leaving the world a blur. Needing air, I pushed the window open, the cold rushing in, sharp against my flushed skin. And then it hit me, the feeling, stronger than ever, a gaze so heavy it stole my breath. It wasn't possible, not here, not inside my room, my sanctuary. My heart pounded, my eyes straining to see the tree line, but without my glasses, it was just a smudge of white and black. Stay with me now, feel the chill of that moment, the way your safe place turns against you. I remembered my papa's binoculars, a relic from his World War II days, tucked in a drawer downstairs. He'd brought them back, legal or not, there, lenses sharp enough to see across fields. I stumbled down, grabbed them, and returned, the feeling gone while I was out of my room, but snapping back the moment I crossed the threshold. I dragged a chair to the window, my hands shaking as I raised the binoculars, scanning the tree line. At first, nothing, just snow and shadows. Then I saw it, a black mass, 6.5 to 7 feet tall, peeking from behind a tree. It was shapeless, a void against the snow, but it moved deliberate, its form shifting to the other side of the trunk when I coughed and looked again. Its gaze burned into me, not just at the house, but at me, knowing I was watching. You see it, too, don't you? That shape, it knows you. It wants you to know it's there. Panic seized me. I dropped the binoculars, ran downstairs, and dragged my mop. Her face creased with worry. There's something out there, I stammered, pulling her to the window. But when we looked, it was gone, the tree line empty, the snow untouched. Mom didn't laugh, didn't call me crazy. She believed in the unseen, always had. Tell me if you see it again, she said, her voice steady but her eyes uneasy. A week passed, nothing happened, and I started to doubt myself, blaming my fever, a smudge on the lens, anything but the truth. But that night, as I lay in bed, a voice broke the silence, sharp and familiar, calling my name. It was my uncle, his tone urgent, coming from inside my room. I bolted upright, my phone's flashlight cutting through the dark, revealing nothing but my posters and cluttered desk. My heart raced, my hands trembling as I lay back, trying to sleep, until another sound tore through the night, a scream, raw and blood-chilling, from outside my window. I lunged for the light switch, slamming the window shut, my breath ragged. Footsteps pounded down the hall, and my little sister burst in, her face pale. "Was that you?" she asked, her voice small. I shook my head, not wanting to scare her, and sent her back to bed, locking my door. I sat up all night, lights blazing, the scream echoing in my mind. Morning came, and I pushed it down, going through the day like nothing happened. But that night, as I drifted toward sleep, another voice came, my grandma, soft and pleading, outside my door, asking me to let her in. My blood froze, my eyes fixed on the locked door, its handle still. I prayed, words tumbling out, begging for protection, until the voice faded. Sleep came, fitful and shallow, and I woke late, keeping the night's terror to myself. Let me take you deeper to a story my papa once told, one that haunted me as I faced those voices. He'd been a boy in these woods, playing by a creek, when he'd heard his mother call him home. He ran only to find her in town, miles away, never having called. He'd felt watched for weeks after, he said, a presence that lingered until he stopped answering the voices. I'd thought it was just a tale, but now, with my own name echoing in the dark, I wondered if he'd faced the same thing. What if it had been waiting all these years for me to listen? The next night I tried an experiment, leaving my door wide open, thinking the voices came when it was cracked or locked. But as I laid down, a tapping began at my window, slow and deliberate, like fingers testing the glass. I ignored it, my heart pounding, and slept, waking to find marks on my skin, faint, jagged lines across my arm, like scratches from something unseen. I searched online, piecing together stories of mimics creatures that stole voices, feeding on fear, growing stronger with every response. The marks, the voices, the black mass, it fit, a puzzle too horrifying to accept. I went to my friend's house 10 minutes away, spilling everything. He was spiritual, his faith a shield I envied. He believed me after some convincing, and we prayed, our hands clasped. A force pulled at us, cold and angry, trying to tear us apart. We held on, his words steady, but the presence lingered, its weight undeniable. The voices haven't stopped. They come at night, my uncle, my grandma, my sister, calling my name, their tones twisted wrong. Sleep is a stranger now, my eyes heavy with insomnia, my room a cage where the window betrays me. If you walk these woods or hear a voice you know, don't answer. Something's out there, and it's learning who you are. The Chesapeake Bay stretched before the pier, its waters dark and restless, hiding something that knew we were there before we knew it. I grew up on Maryland's eastern shore, where the land meets the sea in a tangle of marshes and secrets. My uncle, who I'll call S, was a man steeped in the folklore of these parts, his eyes always searching the horizon for signs of the strange. He'd tell tales of Sasquatches lurking in the pine forests, human-like wolves prowling the back roads, and wendigos haunting the western hills, their hunger a whisper in the wind. But the story he told me in 2007, the one that changed how I saw the bay, wasn't about those creatures. It was about the Chess, Maryland's own mystery, a creature said to glide beneath the waves, its existence debated like the Loch Ness Monster. Swore it was real, and after what he showed me, I couldn't doubt him. Feel the pull of that water, the way it calls you closer, hinting at what lies below Dot. It was a warm summer evening, the kind where the air clings to your skin, thick with salt and the scent of marsh grass. S and his friend, who I'll call R, were at S's house, a weathered, clapboard place near the bay, its windows open to catch the breeze. They'd been sharing stories, the kind that grow wilder with each beer, when S suggested a walk to clear their heads. The path led them through a grove of cedars, their branches swaying in the dusk, to a rickety pier jutting out into the Chesapeake. The water lapped at the pilings, a soft rhythm that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the bay. They stood at the pier's end, the horizon a smear of purple and gold, the world quiet save for the distant call of a gull. You're there with them now, aren't you? On that pier, the water stretching out, its depths hiding something ancient. Dot is leaned against the railing, his eyes scanning the water, always looking for something others missed. R was quieter, content to watch the sky fade, but S was restless, his stories of the paranormal still lingering in the air. They talked of the Marilyn Goatman, a creature said to stalk bridges, and the strange lights that danced over the marshes at night. But the bay was calm, its surface unbroken, until a ripple spread across the water, small at first, then wider, like a stone dropped from nowhere. Froze, his hand tightening on the railing, his eyes locked on the spot where the ripple began. Awe followed his gaze, confusion creasing his face, as the water stirred again, a dark shape rising just beneath the surface. Stay with me now, feel the chill of that moment. The way the bay turns against you. Dot. It was round, smooth, and black, like the hump of some great beast, breaking the water 100 yards out. S's breath caught, his voice low as he said, "That's it, that's the chest." R squinted, skeptical, but the shape moved, sinking and rising, each appearance closer to the pier. The water parted around it, ripples spreading like a warning, the bay's calm shattered by its presence. S fumbled for his camera, an old point-and-shoot he always carried, his hand steady despite the tremor in his voice. The shape vanished. Again the water stilling, but the air grew heavier, charged with a presence that pressed against their skin. You see it too, don't you? That shape gliding closer, knowing you're watching. The pier creaked under their weight, the wood groaning, as if protesting the thing in the water. Raised the camera, his eyes never leaving the bay, while R shifted uneasily, his skepticism giving way to unease. The shape appeared again, 50 yards out, then 30, its movements fluid, deliberate, as if drawn to them. The water seemed to thicken, its surface oily and dark, reflecting the last light of the sky in distorted fragments. And then 10 feet from the pier, the creature rose, its form breaking the surface with a slow, deliberate grace. Its head was long, rounded like a serpent's, but broader, its skin glistening with a sheen that wasn't quite natural. Its eyes glowing amber like embers under water locked onto S and R, unblinking, their gaze a weight that pinned them. In place. Feel the pull of those eyes, the way they strip you bare, knowing every fear you've ever hidden. The creature's face was alien. The creature's face was alien, its features blurred at the edges, as if it belonged to a dream half-remembered. Its mouth, if it had one, was hidden, but its eyes spoke, their glow pulsing with an intelligence that felt ancient, curious, and unervingly aware. S snapped the camera. The shutters clicked, a violation in the silence, capturing the creature's gaze. R stood frozen, his breath shallow, his hands gripping the railing until his knuckles whitened. The chest held their gaze for a moment that stretched into eternity, its presence filling the air with the hum that vibrated in their bones. Then, as suddenly as it had risen, it sank, the water closing over it without a ripple, the bay swallowing. Its secret once more. You're still there, aren't you? On that pier, the water still, but the eyes lingering in your mind, S and R didn't move, their eyes fixed on the spot where the creature had been. The piers creaked the only sound. The bay was calm again, its surface a mirror reflecting the darkening sky. But the air felt alive, charged with the memory of what they'd seen. S lowered the camera, his hands trembling, the weight of the moment settling into his bones. R broke. The silence, his voice shaky, asking what it was. But S had no answer, only the certainty that they'd seen something real, something that didn't belong in their world. They turned back, the pier stretching endlessly behind them, the cedars looming like sentinels as they walked home, the bay's gaze following them through the trees. Let me take you deeper, to a story my grandfather once told, one that echoed. In my mind, when S shared his tale, he'd been a waterman, his life tied to the Chesapeake, and he'd spoken of things beneath the waves, shapes that followed boats, voices that called from the fog. Once he'd seen a shadow in the water, too large for a fish, its eyes glowing like lanterns. He'd never spoken of it again, but his hands shook when he mended his nets, as if the bay had marked him. I'd thought it was just a fisherman's tale, but now, with S's story burning in my mind, I wondered if he'd seen the chest, too. What if it had been watching us all along, waiting for someone to look too closely? When S showed me the photos, days later, I couldn't breathe. The images were grainy, the creature's form blurred, but those eyes, amber, glowing, staring through the lens, were unmistakable. They weren't just eyes. They were windows to something older than the bay, something that knew us, that saw us. I doubted S at first, my rational mind clinging to explanations, manatees, logs, tricks of light, but the photos silenced me. The chest was real, and S had captured it, a moment where the veil between worlds had thinned. He didn't talk about it much after that, but his eyes changed, always drifting to the water, searching for something he hoped he'd never find again. The Chesapeake hasn't been the same for me since. I walk its shores, the marshes whispering at my back, and feel it a presence beneath the waves, patient, waiting. S still tells his stories of demons and shadows, but the chess is different, a mystery that doesn't threaten but lingers. Its eyes a memory that doesn't fade. If you stand by the bay at dusk, watch the water closely. Something's out there, and it knows when you're looking. The air in Appalachia turned sour days before the storm, its weight pressing against my chest, whispering that something unnatural was coming. I live in a small town tucked into the hills of western North Carolina, where life moves slow. The days marked by the hum of crickets and the occasional squabble from neighbors on a Saturday night. Our corner of the world is quiet, unremarkable, a place where nothing much happens, until 4 months ago, when Hurricane Helen tore through our lives, leaving nightmares that still claw at me in the dark. My husband and I had braced for trouble, but no preparation could shield us from what we faced that night. A storm that felt alive, its fury laced with something beyond nature. Feel the heaviness of that air, the way it clings to you, warning you to run. We'd been watching the forecasts all week, the news buzzing with warnings of Helen's approach. Storms usually weaken by the time they reach us, their winds fading into rain that soaks the fields and moves on. But this time was different. A knot formed in my gut, a sixth sense I couldn't shake, telling me the world was off balance. The sky hung low, gray and bruised, the air thick with a metallic tang that stung my throat. We stopped supplies, boarded windows, and checked the generator, every step a ritual to keep fear at bay. Our home, a modest house on a wooded lot, stood firm, its heart a magnolia tree we'd planted when we moved here from Mississippi. That tree was my anchor, its broad leaves a reminder of my childhood in Madison, where magnolias were as constant as the sun. You see it too, don't you? That tree standing tall, unaware of the storm about to claim it. The night began with a low rumble, the kind that vibrates through your bones. At 4 a.m., thunder split the darkness, a jagged blade tearing the sky apart. I jolted awake, my heart racing, the house shaking as if struck. Sirens wailed from the fire station a mile down the road, their cry piercing the night, urging us to move. Winds howled, battering the windows, their force rattling the boards we'd nailed in place. My husband and I stumbled out of bed, pulling on clothes with shaking hands, our breaths sharp in the cold. We grabbed flashlights and hurried to the basement, its concrete walls a promise of safety, though the air down there felt stale, heavy with dread. Stay with me now, feel the house trembling, the darkness closing in, and the storm's voice growing louder. By 5 a.m., the winds were relentless, a roar that drowned out thought. My husband pressed his face to a small window, his flashlight beam cutting through the rain, searching for signs of damage. And then it came a sharp, splintering sound, like the earth itself had cracked. He froze, his face pale, and I joined him, my heart sinking as the beam found our magnolia, its trunk shattered, falling in slow motion toward the house. It missed by inches, its branches splayed across the lawn, leaves torn and scattered like a sacrifice. I choked back a sob, the loss cutting deeper than I expected. That tree was ours, a piece of my past, planted with hope when we built this. Life. I told myself it had saved us, its fall sparing the house, but the words felt hollow, a lie to mask the grief. You feel that loss, don't you? The weight of something precious torn away, leaving only silence. The storm didn't relent. At 6 a.m., our phones erupted with a shrill alert, tornado warnings flashing across the screens. My stomach twisted, fear clawing at me. I'd face a spider the size of a dog before a tornado, its unpredictability a terror that haunted me. Since childhood, the winds screamed, the house groaning under their assault, but no funnel cloud touched us. Later, I'd learned 2 tornadoes had struck nearby, one ripping through a trailer park, leaving homes in splinters. Exhausted, I collapsed on a cot in the basement, sleep pulling me under despite the chaos, my dreams filled with spinning skies and falling trees. Let's pause here. Let the storm's roar settle in your bones, because this is where the nightmare turns. Let me take you deeper to a story my grandmother told, one that echoed as I woke to Helen's wrath. She'd lived through hurricanes in Mississippi, her voice low as she spoke of storms that felt alive, their winds carrying voices, their rain tasting of salt and sorrow. Once, she'd seen a tree fall in a storm, its roots pulling up bones from the earth as if the land itself was grieving. I'd thought it was just a tale, but now, with our magnolia gone, I wondered if Helen was more than a storm, if something had stirred it, given it purpose. What if the earth was angry, and we were its target? At 9:30 a.m., my phone's ring cut through the haze, my mother's voice frantic on the line. "Are you okay?" she asked, her words trembling. I mumbled that we were fine, huddled in the basement, but she cut me off. "Honey, get out of there. The levees are giving way." Her words hadn't settled when the windows shattered, a roar of water flooding the basement, cold and relentless. The room vanished under a surge of river, its force pulling at my legs, stealing my breath. Panic seized me, my fight-or-flight instinct kicking in as I clawed toward the stairs, my husband behind me, his hands steadying me. We reached the main floor, gasping, our clothes heavy with mud and water, the house groaning as the flood claimed its heart. "You're there with us now, aren't you?" In that flood, the water rising, the world slipping away, we didn't pause. We grabbed our keys, a bag of essentials, and ran to the car, the rain blinding, the wind tearing at our skin. The engine roared to life as we sped toward my parents' house, the road a blur of fallen branches and debris. 3/4 of a mile out, a tree blocked our path, its trunk massive, unyielding, like a gate slammed shut. My husband cursed, throwing the car into reverse, searching for another route, but every path was choked with wreckage. "What do?" "We do?" I asked, my voice shaking, fear tightening my chest. He looked at me, his jaw set. "We go back, get the chainsaw, and cut through." We returned, the house looming like a ghost, its windows dark with water. He grabbed the chainsaw, its blade biting through the tree, wood chips flying as we carved a way forward, the storm's howl drowning out our words. By 11 a.m., we reached a gas station, its lights a miracle in the chaos. I stumbled inside, rain dripping from my hair, and asked the cashier for a phone. He pointed to a landline on the back wall, his face weary but kind. I called my mom, her voice a lifeline, telling her we were coming. I grabbed an orange Gatorade, its bright color absurd against the gray world outside, and thanked the clerk, his nod a small anchor in the storm. Back on the road, we hit another fallen tree in my parents' neighborhood, smaller this time and cut through it with less trouble. Their house was dark, power gone, but it was dry, safe, a refuge from the flood we'd escaped. We stayed there, camped out in their basement ironic, after fleeing our own until the storm passed, the world quieting into an uneasy hush. Saturday. Afternoon, we returned to our house, the sight stealing my breath. The flood had gutted it, walls stained, furniture ruined, the magnolia's roots exposed like veins torn from the earth. We moved back with my parents, waiting for insurance to rebuild the loss of weight we carried in silence. And here's the twist, the one that stings. That weekend was my birthday, a celebration drowned in chaos, a cruel joke from a universe with a twisted sense of humor. You feel that irony, don't you? The way fate laughs, turning joy into ruin. I'm no conspiracy theorist, just a country woman from the foothills, but Helen wasn't normal. Hurricanes weaken inland, fading to tropical storms by the time they reach us. But Helen hit as a Category 4, its power defying reason. The wings felt alive, the rain too heavy, the sky too dark, as if something had fueled it, something beyond clouds and pressure systems. I don't make wild claims, but I can't shake the thought that someone or something tampered with nature, bending it to a purpose I can't grasp. Helen is etched in me, the scariest, most unnatural experience of my life, its shadow lingering in the hills. If you live in Appalachia, watch the sky when it turns sour. Some storms bring more than rain, and they don't forget you. Jake's tail thumped against the porch as I sipped my coffee, the dusk painting my Washington land in gold, unaware that the forest beyond was about to show me its truth. I've called a piece of Washington State home for over a decade, a decent stretch of earth just outside a small town where my property kisses the wild expanse of a national forest. These woods are my sanctuary, their trails etched into my bones from years of hunting, hiking and camping under stars that feel close, enough to touch. I'm not one for tall tales, never have been, but what happened that night late one summer, when the days began to shrink, changed how I see the trees. It wasn't a story I'd tell lightly, not unless it was true, and believe me, it was. Feel the weight of that silence, the way it presses against you, hinting at what's watching. Every evening I walked my property line, a ritual to keep things in order. The deer had been bold lately, nibbling at my vegetable garden, so I kept my eyes sharp for their tracks. My dog Jake, a big German shepherd with a heart as fierce as his bark, was always at my side, his nose low, ears alert. That night the sun had dipped below the tree line, leaving a twilight glow that softened the world's edges. I carried a flashlight on my belt, its weight a quiet comfort, though the fading light was enough for now. The air was cool, heavy, with the scent of pine and damp moss, the forest alive with the usual chatter of crickets and birds. We moved along the back of my land, where my fence meets the forest, the trees standing like sentinels, their branches weaving a canopy that swallowed the sky. You're walking with me now, aren't you? The forest stretching out, its secrets just beyond your reach. Jake and I were near the forest's edge when he stopped, his body rigid, ears pinned forward, a low rumble rising from his chest. I froze, my hand hovering over the flashlight, my eyes following his gaze into the trees. Jake wasn't one to spook coyotes, barely earned a glance, but this was different. His fur bristled, his stare locked on something I couldn't see, his growl deep and urgent. The forest, moments ago alive with sound, fell silent, its pulse cut off like a breath held too long. No crickets, no birds, no rustle of leaves, just a void that pressed against my ears, making my heart beat loud in the stillness. My skin prickled, a cold knot forming in my stomach, the air charged with a presence I couldn't name. Feel that stillness, the way it wraps around you, warning you to turn back. I scanned the tree line, my eyes straining in the dim light, expecting a bear or elk, something familiar. But then a sound broke the silence, a deep, guttural grunt, like a bear mixed with a man clearing his throat, heavy and deliberate. It came from just beyond the trees, maybe 20 or 30 yards in, close enough to send a shiver down my spine. My hand found the flashlight, flicking it on, its beam cutting through the dusk, searching for the source. At first I saw nothing, just shadows and branches, until the light caught two glints, suspended in the air, like embers glowing in the dark. My breath caught, my heart stuttering as the beam steadied, revealing something I wasn't ready for. You see those eyes, don't you? They pull you in, they know you, they hold you still. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall, maybe more, its form half hidden behind a tree, but clear enough to stop my world. Its shoulders were impossibly wide, broader than any man's, its body a wall of muscle draped in dark, matted hair that seemed to drink the light. Its breath was visible in the cool air, slow and steady, unhurried, as if it had all the time in the world. The eyes, yellow, piercing, locked onto me, were alive, with an intelligence that felt ancient, predatory, weighing my every move. It stood on 2 legs, not 4, its posture human but not, a violation of everything I knew about the woods. Jake's growl turned to a whimper, his body pressing against my leg, fear radiating from him like heat. That dog faced down anything, but here he was, cowering, and it chilled me to my core. Stay with me now, feel the weight of those eyes, the forest closing in, and Jake's fear mirroring your own. I don't know what possessed me, but I took a step forward, my flashlight trembling. The beam fixed on the creature, its head tilted slightly, as if curious, and then it let out a sound, a deep, guttural roar, raw and earth-shaking, that locked my body in place. My heart pounded, my legs rooted, as the creature moved, not running but vanishing, its form dissolving into the trees with a speed that defied its size. Branches snapped in its wake, the sound fading into the distance, leaving only silence and shadows. Jake whined, his tail low, and I turned, my boots heavy as I moved back toward the house, not daring to run but desperate to escape. I locked every door, every window, grabbed my rifle, and sat in the living room, the weapon across my knees, listening. Jake paced by the door, his ears twitching at every rustle outside, the night pressing against the glass like a living thing. Sleep didn't come, not with those eyes burned into my mind. Let me take you deeper, to a story my neighbor once told, one that haunted me as I sat with my rifle that night. He was a hunter, old as the hills, his face lined with years in these woods. He'd spoken of things that lived beyond the trails, creatures that watched from the shadows, leaving signs for those who looked too long. Once he'd found a deer, torn apart not by teeth but by hands, its bones cracked like kindling. He'd never hunted that ridge again, he said, because some things claimed their ground. I'd nodded, half listening, but now, with Jake's whine echoing in my ears, I wondered if he'd seen it, too. What if I'd crossed a line, stepped into its domain? Morning came, gray and heavy, and I returned to the spot, half hoping I'd imagined it. But the tracks were there, wide and deep, pressed into the earth like a signature. They weren't bare tracks, not with that shape too human, too large, each print heavy with weight. I followed them a few steps, my heart pounding, until they vanished into the underbrush, as if the forest had swallowed them. I didn't tell many people, and those I did laughed or shrugged, calling it a bear, a trick of the light. But I knew what I saw, and it wasn't a bear. The woods haven't been the same since. At night I hear things knocks on trees, sharp and deliberate, or a distant howl that doesn't belong to any wolf. Jake feels it too, his hackles rising, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the porch dot. 2 months later, I found something else, near the same spot, under the noonday sun. A deer carcass, its rib cage cracked open, torn apart with a force that left jagged edges, no bite marks, no clean cuts, just raw, brutal power, like it had been pulled apart by hands. I've seen cougar kills, bear kills, but this was different. A message written in blood and bone. I don't walk the woods after dark anymore, not with that feeling creeping back, the one that makes my skin crawl, like eyes are on me, patient, waiting. Jake senses it, stiffening on the porch, his growl low, staring into a forest that gives nothing away. If you walk these woods, keep your light close. Something's out there, and it knows your name. The new apartment smelled of fresh paint and promise, but as I stood by the window, the Alaska dusk whispered secrets that chilled my bones. Renee and I had finally escaped the haunted property in southern Alaska, where voices called from the woods and shadows lingered too long. Our new home was a small upstairs apartment in town, a haven for us and our dogs, M and C, two huskies whose boundless energy filled the space with life. We'd toured the place weeks ago, the landlord showing. Used the unit below ours, its dim rooms heavy with a chill that made our skin crawl. Renee and I exchanged a glance, silently agreeing it wasn't for us, and chose the brighter, warmer space above. We thought we'd left the paranormal behind, but the darkness, it seems, had followed. Feel the chill of that dusk, the way it clings to you, hinting at what's waiting. Moving in was a whirlwind, boxes cluttering the floor, the dogs weaving through our legs as we laughed and planned our new life. The apartment was cozy, its windows catching the fleeting Alaska light, the walls echoing our voices instead of the eerie whispers of our old home. Downstairs, new neighbors settled in, their black cat often perched in their window, watching the world with unblinking eyes. At first, everything felt right, a fresh start after years of fear. But the light outside their door began to flicker, a restless pulse that no wiring could explain. The landlord replaced the bulb 3 times, each new one glowing briefly before, stuttering back to its eerie dance. I told myself it was nothing, just faulty electrics, but the flicker felt alive, a signal I couldn't ignore. You see that light, don't you? Its rhythm pulling you in, whispering something's wrong. The unease grew, subtle at first, like a shadow moving just out of sight. One night, as Renee and I watched a movie, a heavy sound echoed from below, a slow, deliberate drag, like a rug, being pulled across the floor. We froze, the dogs lifting their heads, ears pricked. Our neighbors weren't home. We'd seen their car leave hours ago, and their cat, sleek and silent, couldn't make that noise. The sound came again, rhythmic, insistent, too weighty for a single animal. Renee's eyes met mine, her face pale, and we turned up the TV, trying to drown it out. But the dragging lingered in my mind, a puzzle piece that didn't fit, a reminder that the downstairs apartment held secrets we hadn't escaped. Stay with me now, feel the weight of that sound, the way it burrows into your thoughts, refusing to let go. The dogs were the first to show it, their behavior shifting in ways that tightened my chest. Renee's husky began staring into the corner of her room, his gaze fixed, unblinking, as if something stood there, invisible to us. At first I brushed it off and was quirky, always chasing shadows, but when my own dog, joined him, their eyes locked on the same empty space, my stomach twisted. One evening, as I sat at my desk, M bolted into my room, his tail low, his body pressed against the wall, like he was hiding from something. I checked for signs of mischief, spilled trash, a mess on the floor, but found nothing, only the faint chill in the air, as if the room held a presence I couldn't see. You feel that chill, don't you? The way it settles in, making you question. What's there? The woods beyond our building didn't help. When we took M and C outside to relieve themselves, they'd freeze, their eyes locked on the tree line, their fur bristling as if sensing something watching. They'd finish quickly, then bolt for the door, their paws scrambling on the pavement, urging us inside. I'd follow, my heart pounding, a prickle at my neck, like something was right behind me, its breath cold against my skin. Once inside, I'd lock the door, my hands shaking, the dogs pressing close, their warmth a fragile shield. Renee felt it too, though we didn't speak of it, our silence a pact to keep fear at bay. But the woods knew us, their shadows stretching longer each night, their gaze unrelenting. Let me take you deeper, to a memory from our old property, one that haunted me as the dogs stared into corners. Our brother Thomas, gifted with sight beyond. Ours had seen spirits in that house, two men arguing, a girl in a purple dress standing in his room, watching. He'd called her Sally, her presence tied to a doll that moved at night, a ragdoll I'd banished to a cargo container. I'd thought leaving that land would free us, but now, with M and C's eyes fixed on nothing, I wondered if Sally or something worse had followed. What if the woods here were no different, hiding things that knew our names? The breaking point came one afternoon when I was at work and Renee was home alone. Our neighbor across the hall, a woman we barely knew, stood outside our door for 20 minutes, muttering to herself, her hands fumbling with the knob. Renee in the shower didn't hear, but the neighbor's Ring camera caught it all her. Voice low, disjointed, her eyes wild as she spoke to no one. I got a call from another neighbor, their voice urgent, and by the time I reached home, the police were there, taking the woman away. She'd been harassing others, they said, her threats escalating, her mind unraveling. We exchanged numbers with the camera's owner, a small comfort, but the incident left us shaken, the line between human and supernatural blurring in my mind. Was she driven by madness or something else, something that whispered in the dark? A co-worker, hearing my story, pressed a bundle of sage into my hands, urging me to burn it, to cleanse our space. I lit it that night, the smoke curling through the apartment, its scent sharp and earthy, a prayer against the unseen. Renee watched, her face tight, the dogs sniffing the air, their eyes wary. I wanted to believe it worked, but the flicker of that downstairs light, the drag of that unseen rug, told me otherwise. You smell that sage, don't you? Its promise fading, leaving only the weight of what's still there. Life moved forward, though the shadows lingered. My parents planned to leave the old property, taking my sisters Ally and Jolene, and brothers Alan and J.J. the newest addition, a seventh child who brought joy despite the chaos. They'd found land in Montana, vast enough for cabins, a barn, a shed with room for our brother Thomas to build his home, and for me to start anew with Y, a man who'd brought light to my days. I dreamed of a cabin with Y and C, woods between us and the world, a fresh start far from Alaska's grip. But our grandfather, stubborn and skeptical, vowed to stay on the old land, unbothered by its hauntings, his disbelief a shield I envied. I begged him to sell, to come with us, but his eyes were firm, rooted to a place that held him fast. Renee would stay in Alaska, moving in with her best friend to finish school, her dog M by her side. We've learned to be adults here, navigating bills and freedom, but the strangeness grows, a tide I can't outrun. M and C still stare into corners, their gazes heavy with knowledge I don't want. The woods still watch, their shadows creeping closer, and I feel it a presence that knows us, that waits. I pray Montana will be different, that Y and I can build a life free of this, but deep down I fear it's only the beginning. If you leave a haunted place, check your shadow. Something might follow, and it won't let you go. Asterisk.
Some homes are built on ground that never forgets, its shadows claiming you as their own. I was the Dark Knight, a silent chronicler, my life bound to a journal that held truths no one else would believe. Our family home stood on acres of earth, its fields a golden sea, its woods a quiet guardian, but beneath its surface pulsed a secret older than the roots. From 2017 to 2025, 7 encounters wove a tapestry of dread through our lives, each marked by a creature too tall, too wrong, its yellow eyes a fire that seared our peace. My journal was my anchor, its pages a witness to a terror that grew with each year, each glimpse. I didn't know then that our home was a stage for something ancient, that its gaze would haunt us through time, through dreams. I didn't know we'd flee, our lives appended, my journal the only proof of a truth too vast to hold. Our house was a sanctuary, its porch sagging under the weight of summer evenings, its windows catching the glow of sunsets over the fields. My parents, Joe and Ruth, were at Soul Joe's hands rough from years of farm work, his laughter a steady rhythm. Ruth's garden a burst of roses and dahlias, her hands tender with earth. I was a teenager in 2017. My world split between high, school's grind, and the quiet of our land. My journal a habit born of a mind too restless to stay silent. I wrote everything: math tests, sunsets, coyote howls at dusk, but nothing prepared me for what I'd record over 8 years. A story of a creature that claimed our home as its own. The land was alive, its fields humming with life, its woods whispering at night. Coyotes roamed, their calls sharp in the dark, and wolves were rumored, their size a legend among farmers. But the creature we met was no animal, no myth we could name. It began subtly, a shadow in the brush, but grew into a presence we couldn't ignore, each encounter a deeper cut, each glimpse a weight we carried in silence. My journal became a refuge, its pages a mirror to our fear, a proof against the world's doubt. The first encounter came in 2017, a Saturday evening, the dining room warm with the scent of Ruth's tacos, the table alive with our chatter. I sat by the window, my fork poised, the sunset painting the fields a bloody red. A shape moved in the thicket, tall and twisted, its form too large for a coyote, too strange for a man. I froze, my breath catching, my eyes locked on its silhouette 8 feet, maybe more, its limbs mangled, its presence a violation of the world I knew. "What's that?" I whispered, but Joe glanced out, his brow furrowing. "Just a wolf, son," he said, his voice steady, but I saw his hand tighten around his glass. Ruth's eyes flicked to the window, her smile fading, and I knew they felt it too. Chill, a weight, a warning. I wrote it in my journal that night, my pen trembling, the first entry in a log that would grow too heavy to carry. I dreamed of it, the creature standing at the field's edge, its yellow eyes glowing, its form shifting. In the moonlight. "You saw me," it whispered, its voice a rasp, and I woke sweating, the darkness outside my window, too deep, too alive. I checked the journal, its ink grounding me, but the dream lingered, a seed of dread that took root. Months later, the second encounter struck. It was another dinner. Ruth's Caesar salad fresh, the air light with our laughter. A knock echoed from the basement, sharp and deliberate, cutting through our voices. Joe frowned, his eyes meeting mine. "Check the French doors, son. Probably a bird." I descended, the stairs cold under my socks, the basement air thick with damp and dust. The windows were dark, no bird, no mark, but the silence was wrong, heavy, with eyes I couldn't see. I stood, my flashlight beam trembling, the air sour with a metallic tang, like blood left to dry. Another knock came, softer, from above the doors, where a cranny hid in shadow. My skin prickled, my heart pounding. A voice in my head urging run. I fled upstairs, my breath ragged, lying about a chickadee to mask my fear. Joe nodded, but his eyes lingered, and Ruth's hands shook as she cleared the plates. My journal caught the truth, its pages a sanctuary for what I couldn't say. That night, I dreamed again, the creature crouched in the cranny, its eyes yellow, its fingers long and claw-like, tapping the glass. "You heard me," it hissed, and I woke gasping. The house too quiet, the journal open on my desk, its words a lifeline. I wrote more, the dream bleeding into the page, my fear a stain I couldn't erase. The third encounter was Joe's, late that year. He returned from the farm at dusk, his face ashen, his boots caked with mud. "Saw something in the field," he told. Ruth, his voice low, his hands unsteady, tall, mangled, moving fast. It had glided through the tall grass, diving away when he met its gaze, its speed unnatural, its form a blur of limbs too long, too thin. Joe never lied, his honesty a rock in our lives, and his fear shook me to my core. Ruth's face tightened, her hands clutching his, their whispers a shield against the truth. That night, Joe sat on the porch, a cigar burning, a gun in his lap, his eyes fixed on the field. Ruth joined him, their voices low, her fear a mirror to his. I watched from my window, my journal open, my pen racing to capture their dread. The creature's shadow a weight on us all. I dreamed of the field, the creature standing among the grass, its eyes yellow, its form twisting like smoke. "You know me," it growled, and I woke trembling, the journal a shield against the dark. I wrote it all, the dream a thread in the growing tapestry. The creature's presence a stain spreading through our lives. In 2018, the fourth encounter broke Ruth's heart. She found her garden dead roses blackened, dahlias reduced to stubs, as if starved overnight. She stood among the ruins, her hands trembling, tears carving paths through the dirt on her cheeks. "My babies," she whispered, her voice raw, her love for those plants a piece of her soul. I saw her grief, my heart aching, my journal capturing her loss, the ground's betrayal a sign we couldn't ignore. We worked together that day, pulling the dead stalks, the air heavy with decay, the woods watching from the edge. Ruth's hands shook, her eyes darting to the trees, her silence louder than words. The dream came again. Ruth in the garden, the creature looming behind her, its eyes yellow, its hands clawing the earth. You touched me, it snarled, and I woke sweating, the journal open, my pen a weapon against the fear. I wrote it down, the dream a warning, the creature's gaze a chain binding us to the land. The fifth encounter followed, the next morning, as Ruth planted new seeds, her hands steady but her eyes wary. The woods erupted screeches, chants, whispers, a cacophony no human throat could make, a sound that clawed at the mind. Ruth froze, her trowel falling, her breath shallow as the creature charged from the trees, its form tall and leathery, its eyes yellow, its limbs a blur. She ran, the creature herding her to the house, its presence a storm of dread. She collapsed inside, her words broken, her body trembling. It was directing me, she gasped, Joe holding her, their faces pale. I listened from the hall, my journal open, my pen racing to capture her terror, the creature's intent a riddle we couldn't solve. That night, I dreamed of the woods, the creature standing among the trees, its eyes yellow, its voice a chorus of whispers. You defied me, it said, and I woke gasping, the journal a shield, its pages thick with our fear. I wrote it all, the dream a mirror to Ruth's ordeal, the creature's shadow a weight we couldn't escape. Years passed, the creature a specter we avoided, our rule unspoken, stay away from the garden in darkness. We lived cautiously, the journal, my constant, its pages a map of our dread. In 2022, the sixth encounter shattered our fragile peace. I was home from college, my freshman year a blur of exams and freedom, tilling a new plot for watermelons under a high sun. My AirPods blared. Rock, the tillers hung drowning the world until Joe's shout pierced through. Don't look behind you, son, he called, his voice raw, and I obeyed, my heart pounding, walking slowly to the patio where he and Ruth stood, their faces pale. I turned, my breath stopping a creature, 15 feet away, standing in broad daylight. Its skin dark and leathery, its face human but raw, no nose, no ears, just yellow eyes with black pupils, staring, curious. It was still, its gaze a weight, its presence a violation of the sun's warmth. We froze, the air thick with a sour, metallic scent, the world silent except for our breaths. Ruth's hand gripped Joe's, her eyes wide, Joe's jaw tight, his. Gun useless in the shed. I felt it, a pull, as if the creature knew me, its curiosity a blade against my skin. It turned, walking away, its steps deliberate, its silence louder than any scream. We stood, trembling, until it vanished into the woods, the journal in my room waiting for the truth. I wrote that night, my hands shaking, tears blurring the ink. The dream followed, the creature in the garden, its eyes yellow, its form towering. Over me. You stayed, it whispered, and I woke crying, the journal open, its pages a witness to our fear. We spoke little of it, the encounter a wound we couldn't close, the creature's gaze a chain we couldn't break. The seventh encounter came yesterday, 2025, a Thursday hike with Joe and Ruth, our boots crunching through our neighbor's land, the air cool with spring's promise. A text stopped us cold, our neighbor's words a knife. Do you have someone over? There's a tall man on your patio. My heart sank, Joe's face hardening, Ruth's hand trembling in mine. We raced home, the car's tires screaming, the house looming in the dusk. There it was sitting on the porch, motionless, its form too tall, too thin, its eyes yellow in the fading light. It saw us, standing with impossible speed, its limbs a blur as it fled into the woods, its silence a threat that echoed in my bones. We packed that night, the decision final, our home no longer ours. Joe's face was stone, Ruth's eyes red, my journal thick with years of dread. We'll move, start fresh, but the creature's gaze follows, its eyes of fire in my dreams. I've searched for answers, Wendigo, cryptid, curse, but no name fits, no story holds the truth. My journal is my proof, its pages a map of a terror no one else will believe. Some lands don't let you stay, I know now, their shadows a claim. You can't escape. Asterisk, if your home feels watched, if the air grows heavy, don't.